Hello, sports fans, and welcome to Let Me Speak, the show that shares sports' biggest headlines explained, uninterrupted, and maybe a little audacious. I'm Joe Braverman, and today's topics we'll be discussing are: ahead of the Sweet 16, the moments and results that have been the most surprising in the men's bracket. Plus, resetting the NFL after the litany of trades and signings that stunned the football world. And did Carlos Correa make the right choice in his free agency decision? It's episode 66 of Let Me Speak, and it starts right now. Hello, everybody. Once again, here on Thursday, March 24th, 2022, the 66th episode of Let Me Speak. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in wherever you are getting this podcast. I want to wish everyone a belated happy St. Patrick's Day. Hope everyone had a great time, had a lot of fun celebrating the holiday. I know at least here in the Swampscott area, there was nothing much going on, but I was able to head to South Boston for the traditional, or what used to be a tradition, but now it's back, the St. Patrick's parade in South Boston. I was able to check it out at my other job down alongside West Broadway, and it was pretty surreal. It's amazing, you can really start to wonder why there are so many numbers of people, why there are such huge crowds, not only just for that one day for Parade Sunday, but the entire holiday starting from that Thursday up through Sunday. So it was a little crazy, a little chaotic, but it was 2 years in the making. First parade since 2019, and just had a tremendous time. It was a great celebration to see the parade, getting to see the mayor, the bagpipes, a couple bands. It was pretty cool to see that for the very first time. I hope to, continue that tradition. And if you're not in the Swampscott area or not in the South Boston area, I do recommend getting out there. It's definitely a bucket list thing to check out the parade, because it was a little bit of a shorter route than normal for this year. But obviously that's with the return after the pandemic. Hopefully by next year, 2023 will be the regular route. But March is not only for St. Patrick's Day, it's for March Madness, and the men's college basketball tournament has been living up to everything that expected. I mean, I talked about that this was the year of parity. There'd be upsets galore. And sure enough, just looking at my bracket real quick, there have been a lot of upsets. I'm pretty happy with myself to pick a couple of upsets to see. Some teams, like I knew New Mexico State. I picked New Mexico State to beat UConn 12/5. I got that one right. Let's see, just looking else here. Was able to correctly pick Murray State, Creighton, TCU, Houston, just a little some small stuff going on. But outside of the bracket, there have just been moments in general during this tournament that have been surreal, absolutely surreal. And I think the biggest moment and surprise has to be St. Peter's making it all the way to the Sweet 16. I mean, there have only been a handful of 15 seeds to make the Sweet 16. And look at this little school here, knocking off the big monsters, some national championship predictions in Kentucky, able to knock them off in OT and then go to the round of 32 and knock off Murray State. But I was able to watch a little bit of that game and then got to check out the highlights afterwards. And the Peacocks and the Wildcats, that was a thriller going all the way to overtime. I mean, there was about 2.5 minutes left in regulation, down 8. And the way St. Peter's was able to come back and stifle Kentucky was incredible. And really throughout the whole game, it kind of just looked like Kentucky was lost on defense. I thought St. Peter's did a great job with their off the ball movement, keeping the paint clear, opening the door for a lot of backdoor cuts, which they were able to capitalize on. So I just thought I thought Kentucky didn't have their greatest game defensively just because they looked lost with all the ball movement, the weave at the top of the key. Just they just looked a little lost and a little confused. I thought they would have been able to pick up the. I thought they would have been able to make the adjustments, the later the game got, but St. Peter's is just they got the heart of a line, and there are two players on that roster that I'm really circling right now. The first one is KC Nadefo. I thought he's huge right now in the center spot, especially in the next round game against Murray State. 17 points, 10 rebounds, but 6 blocks. 6 blocks. That's going to be very crucial for St. Peter's if they want to continue to go far, is Nadefo being that presence down low at the center spot and just block after block after block. It's going to be a little tough because they do have Purdue, and Purdue's a really good team. I just think if they're going to win, it's going to be because of Nadefo playing strong defensively down low. If he's able to replicate the numbers, not only having the double-double, but then the 6 blocks, maybe not 6 blocks, but somewhere around there, maybe like 3 or 4, something like that. That'd be huge in the game against Purdue. But of course, everyone's talking about Doug Edert. Edert is everyone's hero. I mean, that game against Kentucky with clutch shot after clutch shot. I mean, come on. In back-to-back games, he's got 20 points on 5 of 7 shooting and 13 points on 4 of 6 shooting coming off the bench. And I kind of compare it to how Alex Caruso was able to get so famous during his time with the Lakers, as he just looks like a guy who shouldn't be a top basketball player. And then he just comes out and shocks everyone with the way he plays, the way he was able to shoot, and just living for the big moments. I think that's what's turned Edert into everyone's hero. And I think, he's just going to continue on his legacy if the Peacocks are able to go further and further into the tournament. So I will say it's pretty surreal to see St. Peter's, a 15 seed, making it this far. And they're a very likable squad. It's a small school rising up to the big giant in Kentucky and John Calipari, and then knocking off Murray State in a strong fashion. So, I think everyone will be rooting for St. Peter's. I don't know if they're going to go as far, into the Elite Eight or the Final Four, but it's just been great to watch. They are this year's Cinderella. They are this year's Cinderella team. But another thing I wasn't quite expecting was Michigan. I didn't think Michigan, for the way their season ended with Juwan Howard being suspended and then going out early in the Big Ten tournament, I didn't expect them to rebound and get into the Sweet 16. It's just been a lost year. I kind of had a feeling I was going 50-50 on, just looking at the bracket real quick to pick either Colorado State or Michigan. I just thought Michigan had, just too many downhill spirals, late in the season. I didn't think at the minimum they would have gotten past Tennessee. I think that would have been for me, but they've looked strong in both of those games, beating the number 6 team and the number 3 seed. And I think there's one player to really look out, and that's Hunter Dickinson. If you remember, Michigan made it all the way to, I believe it was the Elite 8 last year. And Dickinson just has the experience from last year's run. And the way he plays for the Wolverines, the ability to stretch the floor, he can shoot it from outside, he can score in the post, he can get in the paint. I mean, in that game against Tennessee, 27 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists versus the Volunteers. I think, if any team is going to try and beat Michigan, they're going to have to contain that big center wearing the number 1 for Michigan. I think Dickinson has been the ultimate X factor for how the Wolverines have been able to play. And, it will be tough to play against Villanova. Villanova is always a very strong team, but I do think if we see the kind of game from Michigan that we saw in the first 2 rounds, I think they maybe even have a chance to knock off a top team like an Arizona or a Houston if they get into the Elite 8. I think if they just put it all together, and if Juwan Howard is able to motivate his guys enough. But I was not expecting Michigan to go as far as they have just because of the way the season ended. But props to the Wolverines in that Big Ten school for representing the Big Ten strong. But then the final team I think that shocked me, or I should say the game that shocked me the most, was probably Baylor and North Carolina. Now, I did have in this bracket I'm looking at when I filled it out last week, North Carolina knocking off Baylor, but I didn't think it was going to happen the way it did. I mean, the Tar Heels had a huge lead on the Bears. Okay. They were up 25 with about 10 minutes to go in regulation. Baylor forces overtime, and then they were able to pull away and beat the defending champs. And part of me just looks at Baylor and that team. I just think they were too heavy on the 3-point shooting. Just looking at the highlights in some of that game, they were leaning too much on the 3-point shot. They were 9 of 37 and only shot 24% from three. And when you look at how they shot from the field, they were 28 of 81 and only shot almost 35% from the field. So I think, credit is to North Carolina's defense, the way the Tar Heels were able to rebound like that. But to see them as an 8 seed, to look as dominant as they are, I thought they were a little underseeded. I thought they definitely should have been maybe a 5 or a 6, maybe not an 8, just to see the way that they were able to perform and just stepping up in a big time. I think it does concern me that they did lose a 25-point lead, and now they've got to play, UCLA, Purdue, and or St. Peter's. So I don't think those performances are going to get them far enough, if they continue to go far away. I think that coaching staff is going to sit down with this team and say, listen, that 25-point lead, you got lucky. You got very, very lucky. That happens again, those teams are going to make you pay, because not everyone is going to shoot as bad early on as Baylor did. They're not going to have really bad halves. There are going to be adjustments made. As you saw, Baylor able to come back, force it to overtime, but just the way the offense looks, scoring from the outside, hitting their shots, and then able to lock down Baylor and deny them from three, I thought very impressive by North Carolina. But I think so far that has to be the game of the tournament so far, is to see Baylor almost pull off a huge comeback and then to win it in overtime. I think whatever result could have happened from that game, I thought it was the game of the tournament. But before we sign off on this segment, just quick predictions on the Final Four. Right now, I still have in my bracket that I'm looking at in front of me, I still got 3 of my 4 teams available. Gonzaga, Arizona, and Purdue are still there. Now, just looking at the matchups really, really quick. Right now, it would be Gonzaga and Arkansas, Texas Tech and Duke, North Carolina, UCLA, Purdue and St. Peter's. And then on the other side, Arizona, Houston, Michigan, Villanova, Kansas, Providence, and then Iowa State and Miami. So I think just really quickly, Final Four predictions. I think I'm gonna stick with Gonzaga and Arizona. I think those two teams are gonna make it. I do think the way the East has shaped, I think Purdue, they've shown glimpses of it. If they can get past, I think it's going to be a blowout against St. Peter's. I think, again, it's been a great run, but I don't think they're going to make it that far. I think Purdue, they get past UCLA. I think they get themselves into the Final Four. And then this one's a tricky one. I think it's going to be either the winner of Kansas or Providence. And I just think, Providence, shout out to the Provost family, Emmy and Aaron. I just think they're a small school, and there's always that small school, someone you don't expect to get into the Final Four. I thought it was going to be Kansas, but I just scratched it out real quick. I had Iowa there, but obviously they lost in the very first game. But I think Providence rises up. I think they beat Kansas, and then whenever they play Iowa State or Miami, I think they're going to beat them. I think there's somehow, some way, the Friars are going to get themselves into the Final Four, but I think that's where they're going to stick. But we'll see what happens when we get into the Final Four. And the good thing, is that they call it March Madness, because it is truly living up to the hype. for anything to rival March Madness right now in terms of the news, but I think the NFL has maybe even leapfrogged it with the amount of movement that is going on. It is literally insane right now in the NFL offseason, and we haven't even hit the draft. There's been crazy signings, crazy trades, huge extensions. It is insane what is going on right now. And of course, it only gets amplified with the big trade yesterday between the Dolphins and the Chiefs. Kansas City giving up possibly its biggest weapon in history in Tyreek Hill. They trade him to the Dolphins for 5 picks. And these are really good picks. These are two, I think a first rounder and a second rounder that are both in the top 50. Then next year, a first round, a second round, and then a third round. But not only that, but the Dolphins also were able to sign Tyreek Hill to a 4-year, $120 million extension with $72 million guaranteed. Now, the money is insane, which is a conversation in itself. But the move itself, I never would have thought that the Chiefs would give up any of their big three. And by big three, I mean Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill. Never thought that would have happened. And you look at where the AFC is at right now, Kansas City was 1 game away from the Super Bowl. They've hosted the AFC Championship 4 years in a row. And it blows my mind why Kansas City wouldn't want to just stick it out with a guy like Tyreek Hill, a guy who's maybe the fastest player in the NFL, the way he's able to get separation down the field and even on short passes, just outrun everybody. I don't know why they wouldn't want to commit. I don't know if it's because he's 28 years old and they're maybe looking at metrics saying that, this is when receivers sort of take a dip a little bit. I don't know if they're looking at it like that, but now, even though he's made 6 Pro Bowls, look at what Miami has added along with that. They have retooled their whole offense. I mean, you already have Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, and Mike Gesicki as huge weapons on offense. But then you bring in 2 great running backs in Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert. You get Tyreek Hill to go along with all those guys, plus Cedric Wilson from the Cowboys. And then you get maybe the best offensive lineman out there on the market, sign him from the Saints, Terran Armstead. I mean, this offense is insane right now for Miami, and their defense is just as good. But I think all the success is going to rely on Tua Tagovailoa. I think it's going to be that and the consistency, because this was a team that was eliminated within the last 2 weeks of the regular season, and it was only because they started 1-7. So it's going to be consistency, which is number one. And number two is, how is Tua gonna play at quarterback? We have seen him the first 2 years of his career with Miami. He's been a little inconsistent and he's been off the mark. Year 3, you got to hope he takes a big leap forward, because he's got weapons galore. And I think there's no more reasons as to why, Tua shouldn't struggle. He's got all the pieces there. And if he does struggle and Miami ends up, missing the playoffs, or worse, a sub 500 record, then I think the little birdies are going to start talking, saying, hey, maybe Tua's not the guy. And you got to start, maybe revisiting, maybe trading him for Deshaun Watson, or maybe you got to go back into the draft, something like that. But I think that's where it starts and ends with Miami, is Tua Tagovailoa and the way he plays and gets all of these weapons incorporated. But just quickly back on Kansas City, now that they lost Tyreek Hill, I don't think they're automatic favorites anymore. When you look at a team like Kansas City, if you've got, a top 3 quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, a top 3 wide receiver in Tyreek Hill, and a top 2 tight end in Travis Kelce, you think if you're on the other side of the football, that is a scary, big 3 to go up against. Now that one of them is gone, I can't say they're the automatic favorites anymore. I think also because the AFC has been so wide open, not only last year, but just looking at the moves, everyone's getting better, including teams within their own division. I can't even say that they're the favorites for the Super Bowl. I can't say that they're automatic favorites. I don't think Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy to replace Tyreek Hill. I don't think Byron Pringle, Mecole Hardman, I don't think any of them are able to replace what Tyreek Hill can do. And now the question is going to become, how well does Patrick Mahomes play without a game-altering weapon? All he's got now in terms of game-altering is Travis Kelce. You don't have anyone else that's really a big difference maker. So I really want to see what Kansas City does for the rest of this offseason and heading into camp, how they're able to replace a guy as incredible as Tyreek Hill. And I would have said, that's probably the biggest move that's happened in the offseason so far. I'll put that over everything else. I would say the shocking move has to be Deshaun Watson. Of course, everyone, last week when you saw that he wasn't going to get criminally charged, everyone's saying, oh, he's up for grabs. And apparently he was up for grabs, and he's now got a new team, and that's the Cleveland Browns. They gave up 3 first-round picks over the next 3 years for Deshaun Watson, and then made him the highest paid player in NFL history. 5 years, $230 million guaranteed on the extension. Now, I think for Cleveland, number one, they should be absolutely ashamed of how they've treated Baker Mayfield. I mean, this was a guy who had one bad year, okay? One bad year after taking this team to the Super Bowl, or to the playoffs, and to a winning record for the first time in a long time. And now everyone's saying, oh, he's not good anymore. He's just like every other Cleveland quarterback, okay? Baker Mayfield's better than any Cleveland quarterback in the last 20 years. And you want to kick him to the curb for a guy who hasn't played competitive football in over a year and is probably going to be suspended because his civil lawsuits are still there? What a stupid move, okay? They had no transparency in committing to Baker Mayfield as a quarterback, and I'm kind of glad that he's going to find himself on another team. And I think there are still teams that could use a quarterback like Baker Mayfield. I know the Seahawks are looking for someone. The Panthers are looking for someone. Maybe even the Steelers within the division. I think Baker Mayfield needs a fresh start. We've already heard that he's requesting a trade, and I think he'll be better off not in Cleveland. But for the move itself, for the Browns, to give that much to Deshaun Watson, because as I said, even though he's still got those civil lawsuits, he's probably going to be suspended. The length of time, we have no idea. He hasn't played competitive football in over a year, so we don't know what he's going to look like, if he's going to look anything like himself. Because when he's on the field, he's one of the top quarterbacks in this league. The way he's able to throw the ball down the field and escape pressure, he's one of the best, probably top 10, top 15. But just the situation that's going on, I understand they got a lot of weapons. They brought in Amari Cooper. They still have the 2 great running backs in Chubb and Hunt. I don't see anything working out until I see it on the field. It's just a lot of unknowns for Deshaun Watson. If he's suspended for 6 games, it's hard to say that they can get to the top of the AFC North if Deshaun Watson is suspended for that long time. Now, because the division is so tough, you got the defending AFC champions and the Bengals. You got the Ravens, who are going to get better, and the Steelers, who made the playoffs last year. It's a tough division. In terms of the style of play, on paper, Cleveland looks great on offense. But I don't know how Cleveland is going to turn things around. It keeps them afloat. It keeps them afloat in terms of a playoff contender. The AFC is so wide open, and I think just them, making these moves, I think does keep them afloat. But we'll just have to see when training camp and the season gets underway. And also just finding out about those civil cases with Deshaun Watson. Does he get suspended? Does he not get suspended? Will he be sued or not? That's something to really keep your eyes out on. But another quarterback that's on the move is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan spends, over 12 years in Atlanta. The Falcons trade their franchise quarterback now to the Colts for a 3rd-round pick. Now, on Indy's side of things, I think this moves the needle slightly. Not a ton, but slightly. Because I just think Matt Ryan, he's a likable guy. I think he is a better option than Carson Wentz, but he just hasn't been the same guy since the Falcons made the Super Bowl and he won that MVP. He's only had one season with a winning record since then, and his total record is 35-46. And you also got to keep in mind the Colts, this is like their fifth different quarterback that'll start on opening day in a row. I think it was like Luck, Tolzien, Brissett, Rivers, Wentz, and now Matty Ice. I'll root for Matty Ice, but similar to Cleveland, I think this moves the needle slightly. When you put Matt Ryan in the discussion, if you sub him for Carson Wentz in that last game against Jacksonville, do they win that game? Do they get themselves in the playoffs? I would say yes. Matt Ryan is a better option. I think he's got a lot more pieces offensively in Indy than he does in Atlanta. But I just think in terms of, going for a Super Bowl or challenging the Titans for the division, I don't think they're there just yet. I think, if the needle is right now sitting at like a 5 or a 6 right now for the Colts, that, goes up to like 6.5 or 7. That's how far I think it goes. But again, another quarterback on the move. I don't know if Matt Ryan will have a career resurgence like Tom Brady in Tampa or Matt Stafford in LA, maybe even Russell Wilson this year in Denver. We'll just, again, another wait and see to see how Matt Ryan incorporates with this new team. But the last big move that I wanted to talk about that's happened over the last week actually happened as we were recording, and that was Davante Adams. Of course, Davante Adams was not going to play under the franchise tag. Everybody knew that. But apparently it was more than that, as Adams gets traded to the Raiders and he gets signed to a 5-year extension for $142.5 million, including $67.5 million guaranteed. Similar to Tyreek Hill, I never would have thought Davante Adams would have been traded. I thought Green Bay would have been better to just let him walk. And you have to think about, where is Aaron Rodgers' mindset at? This was a guy who committed to staying with the Packers. He said, I will stay with the Packers. And reports are coming out that maybe he knew that Adams was gone. Maybe he didn't know. That's still up in the air. But, for the NFC, at least for Aaron Rodgers' side of things, the good news is the NFC isn't anywhere close to the AFC. So there's still a chance that the Packers could make some noise. And of course, you're never going to count Aaron Rodgers out, especially with the weapons that they have. But to see the Raiders get as good as they have, seeing what Josh McDaniels and Brad Ziegler have done coming into Vegas and putting the Raiders up there now with the Chiefs, with the Chargers, and with the Broncos. I mean, not only Adams, but you get Chandler Jones. I think the Raiders have won the offseason for getting Adams, putting him and Derek Carr up. This is all going to be now on Derek Carr. How well does he play when he's got all the weapons around him? Because essentially he was one quarter away from not making the playoffs, and everyone's saying, oh, that's trade bait right there. It's time to let him go. But sure enough, the Raiders get into the playoffs, and they were an interception, maybe 10 yards away from getting one round past the wild card. So how does Derek Carr do? Similar to Tua in Miami, there's no more excuses, no more reasons as to why this team doesn't perform up to expectations. So I want to see how incorporated Davante Adams is, because now Derek Carr has the number one target. He's got Davante Adams, and he's also got Darren Waller as well. Don't forget that, and a very underrated receiver in Hunter Renfrow. He's got the pieces. How well does he use them? But this has to be maybe the most chaotic NFL offseason in recent memory. And it's not even the draft. Just wait until training camp gets underway. The month of March has been absolutely crazy in terms of sports news, with the MLB ending their lockout, getting into free agency, NFL, March Madness, NHL, NBA. There's so much stuff going on, but we got to condense some smaller headlines. It's time once again for quick hits. Now, in the MLB, they've got just as much noise in their free agency pool as the NFL, and arguably the top target on the free agency board finally made his decision, and that's Carlos Correa. Carlos Correa, I think, made a very surprising decision about his immediate future. He signs with the Twins, the Minnesota Twins, for 3 years and $105 million with opt-outs after year 1 and year 2. Very interesting that he decides to go short-term instead of long-term. I don't know if he thinks he's on sort of a prove-it kind of year. I don't know if that's the case, but just looking at Minnesota last year, you got to remember the previous 2 years, they had won the AL Central. They won the division, but then last year in 2021, 73 and 89, and finished last in the AL Central. But you got to keep in mind, they dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of shuffling in the lineup. Not a lot of time for Miguel Sano, and just everyone had some really down years. I do like the retooling that they've been doing in the offseason. Not only do you add Correa, but you get Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela from a trade with the Yankees. You put them in the lineup with Miguel Sano, Byron Buxton, Jorge Polanco, Max Kepler. You boost the power in that lineup. I mean, this was a team, even with that record, were 5th in the league in home runs last year. So I think this offense is going to get back to what we knew for a couple of years. The question mark, though, for, taking that extra step is the pitching. They were 26th in team ERA, but they did get Dylan Bundy and Sonny Gray this offseason. So I think Minnesota is going to bounce back, and at least now with the expanded playoffs, they're going to challenge for that wild card spot. And on Houston's side, that's a big bat to replace. It's hard to see anyone replacing a shortstop the caliber of Carlos Correa. But sticking in the MLB, we got another big bat off the market, and that's Nick Castellanos. The slugger just signed with the Phillies. 5 years, $100 million. And honestly, I talked about the Phillies last week, about how sneaky good they've had an offseason. This lineup just gets better and better. I mean, you've got the reigning NL MVP in Bryce Harper. With all of his previous weapons, now you add Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos. It's going to be interesting, though, defensively, how they're going to incorporate these two guys. Because, again, the universal DH, you think these two guys would be automatic fits right then and there. But you're going to have to put one of them in the field. And looking at the numbers, they're not good defensive players. I mean, when you look at Castellanos, he had a minus 1.4 defensive WAR, wins above replacement. And Kyle Schwarber last year had a minus 0.8. So I don't know how the Phillies are going to be able to work that out defensively with those two, because you have to put one of them in the field. Maybe Kyle Schwarber moves to first base, or maybe he goes back into the outfield. Not 100% sure, but again, I could easily see Philly getting to at least a wild card spot, because this was a team, they had probably 3 good months. 3 good months. Everything else was really, really bad. And now with the expanded playoffs, you think, last year, if there were expanded playoffs, this team would have gotten in. So I think Philadelphia finds themselves back into the playoffs with the moves in the offseason that they've made. Sticking with moves and trades, we got to talk about the NHL Trade Deadline. It has come and gone. There were some moves, but there weren't really big blockbuster moves. I think some of the ones you got to talk about are Marc-Andre Fleury going back to a winning team. He gets traded from the Blackhawks to the Minnesota Wild. I really want to see what the Wild are going to do, how Coach Dean Evason is going to handle the playing time, because Cam Talbot, he's been struggling a little bit, but he's still 25, 12, and 1 with a 2.84 goals against average on the year. So how they balance the time between Fleury and Talbot remains to be seen. But then you've also got the veteran presence of Claude Giroux, the longtime Flyer, now gets a chance at the Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. I think the Panthers have themselves, they're challenging Tampa. They're challenging everyone in the East, Carolina. I think this is a good move for the Panthers to pick up a veteran presence like Claude Giroux. But of course, you got to talk about the Avalanche, just adding more pieces to a stacked lineup. Okay, this was a team that already had 4 players in the top 20 in points scored this season in the NHL. You had Mikko Rantanen, you had Kadri, both with 75, Makar had 71, and Nate McKinnon was 68. And their whole roster has 12 players with at least 20 points on the year. And now the top offense in the NHL just has to shore up that defense, and they did it, getting John Manson from defense, and then picking up Arturi Lehkonen and Andrew Cogliano. I think Avalanche are just separating themselves more and more with the moves they had made, and it would be very surprising to see them get bounced early on in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Outside of sports, the city of New York is expected to lift the vaccine mandate today, meaning all unvaccinated players who play in New York, this includes the Nets, the Knicks, the Mets, and the Yankees, can now play at home. And not only is this big for the Yankees, I think the biggest athlete has to be Kyrie Irving. He gets to be a full-time player, and it's at the most important time right now. I mean, he did score 43 last night against the Memphis Grizzlies, but they still lost that game. When you look at where the standings are right now for Brooklyn, all signs are pointing to them at least being in the play-in spot right now. But you look at the position where they are right now in the conference, they're still chasing Toronto, and they're only a few games up on Charlotte and Atlanta. So every game is crucial. And if you have someone like Kyrie Irving still on the floor, that's big, absolutely big, because the way the standings are set, if the season were to end right now, it would be Brooklyn traveling to Toronto, and Canada ain't anywhere close with lifting their vaccine mandates, which means Kyrie's not going to play. So you want to hope and pray that you stay at least 8th, because if you have to go to Canada without Kyrie Irving and beat the Raptors, who have been playing better and better, or you have to go to Cleveland, that would be the 2 things that the Nets are really looking for right now. They either need to get up to that 7th spot or hope Toronto leapfrogs Cleveland, because right now Kyrie Irving ain't playing in Canada. And obviously it has been just a headache and a nightmare to dissect all of these Nets things between Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving, but at least there's some kind of clarity knowing that Kyrie Irving is back to being a full-time player. And lastly, a stunning retirement earlier on in the week. The world number 1 in women's tennis, Ash Barty, has retired from tennis at 25 years old. 25, that's so young. And it was only 2 months after her 3rd career Grand Slam win at the Australian Open. She had also won the Wimbledon the last time they played. I mean, I just can't believe, I was very surprised to see at the top of her game, she retires. She's been number 1 for the last 114 weeks. That's over 2 years that she's been number 1 in the world of women's tennis. Now, I'm not going to say, this is totally, shut the door, lock it up, and throw away the key, because she did step away because of burnout for 2 years back in 2014. So the door is still open for her to return. But just, listening to, the reasons and the explanations that she gave, just burnout, she's content, happy, satisfied. So I'm not going to be the one to try and, throw out a lasso and try and pull her back into the game. I'm not going to do that. But if she's content, I'm not going to argue with it. But in terms of women's tennis, with no Barty and Serena Williams near the end of her career, it's anyone's guess who's going to be, maybe the next big star. Maybe Naomi Osaka gets back to the top of the rankings. Maybe Coco Gauff steps up as the American. Maybe the veteran Victoria Azarenka can possibly rise up and get herself back to number 1. It's anyone's guess what will happen in women's tennis. But I do salute Ash Barty for an unexpected retirement at a young age, but a great career nonetheless. And that, folks, wraps up this week's edition of Quick Hits. is once again time to get into the city and look at our Boston teams. It's time for our Let's Get Local segment of the week. And we start off the field, off the ice, with a couple of free agency moves, some trades. And we start with the Red Sox making a big splash in free agency with Trevor Story, one of the top five free agents on the market when free agency started, signs with the Red Sox, 6 years, $140 million. Now, just listening to him in the introductory press conference, he really talks about winning. He wants to win, and he got more money from Colorado, but he said himself that he wants to win, and that's what I like. They're looking for winning, maybe not necessarily ring chasing, stuff like that, or teaming up, but I do like hearing, Trevor Story is just the ultimate competitor. And obviously the big talk was around, Story, Xander Bogaerts. They're both shortstops, but we know that Story is going to be playing second base. He's going to move from shortstop. Bogaerts is going to be at short, and Devers is going to be at third. And what I do think possibly, look out for this later on in the year, is that it does offer some flexibility where you could maybe put Story at shortstop, move Rafael Devers to first base and Xander Bogaerts to third base, or you could leave Devers at third. It makes you wonder a lot about Xander Bogaerts because he is in the final year of his contract. I think the Red Sox do find a way to keep him on. I think they do. He's going to be a lifetime Red Sox. That's what I think. And it's shocking to me to see Chaim Bloom make this kind of move, because we've seen from his time as general manager of the Red Sox he's been, looking at the farm system. He's trying to get under luxury tax and all that stuff. But to see him make this kind of move to go after Trevor Story kind of caught me off guard to see what's going on with that. But it's good to see Story on the Red Sox. You now have got a lot of right-handed hitters, okay? You've got a lot of power from the right side of the plate. And, of course, it makes up for the offensive power you lost in Kyle Schwarber. Now you've got Bogaerts on that right side, Martinez. You put in Story there. You could throw in a Christian Vasquez as well if you wanted to throw him in that category. But the thing I see with this lineup, though, is there's not a ton of pop from the left side of the plate. Is when you're looking at the roster right now, the only hitters who are lefties right now are Rafael Devers, Alex Verdugo, Jarren Duran, and Jackie Bradley Jr. Those are the only guys you have that can hit lefty right now. And honestly, you can only really trust Devers and Verdugo. I don't know. We don't know until we see it with Jarren Duran. And obviously, Jackie Bradley Jr. has absolutely sucked in terms of offensive production. I don't. That's the only thing that would concern me, is when you go so deep into analytics and stuff like that, that other teams are going to, stack the deck against you. That, if you put out a left-handed hitter, you've got mostly right-handed guys. So it'll be interesting to see later on in the year, how teams are going to attack it in that kind of way when it gets down to the playoff chase. Because ultimately, before the Trevor Story move, I thought this team is going absolutely nowhere. As I said last week, they're going nowhere. They're not going to get anywhere close to that spot. I do think now they're back to that sort of wild card contender status. And plus, with the division so tight with Toronto, Tampa, and New York, I think this keeps them in the loop and at least makes them contenders, not championship contenders, but just playoff contenders, just seeing what this team has been able to do. And there could be some farm guys, some guys in the AAA or in AA that might be rising to the ranks and be better than everyone thought. We don't know that, but I think for now, Red Sox Nation is enjoying the pickup that Chaim Bloom and the Red Sox made, picking up Trevor Story, and the kind of pull hitter that he is with the power that he has. All he's got to do is get it up high enough over the green monster, and that thing will leave the ballpark. So if you're driving on the Mass Pike on 495, be careful during baseball season when you see the Red Sox plays. There could be a lot of baseballs coming your way. But as I said, we're sticking with moves off the field and off the ice in particularly. Let's talk about what the Bruins did at the trade deadline. They made a lot of headlines with some moves and some non-moves. I think obviously you got to talk about the big trades that they had. First, you get a smaller trade getting defenseman John Brown from the Senators. But of course, the big one came in the Anaheim trade. You get Hampus Lindholm and Cody Curran from Anaheim. You give up John Moore, Urho Vakanainen, and a couple of picks. And afterwards, Lindholm was able to sign an 8-year, $52 million contract shortly after the trade. Now, in my eyes, this is one of the areas that Boston really needed was depth at the defense spot. And they've got maybe one of the better defenders in the league. I think they get stronger and tougher at the blue line with Lindholm now in the lineup. Not only that, but similar to what Bruce Cassidy was able to do with the forwards, breaking up the perfection line. You can move around the defensive pairings. You can put Lindholm with Charlie McAvoy or Brandon Carlo or Mike Riley. You can bounce him back and forth from the first and second line, maybe even throw him on the third line from time to time. So I thought that was a big move by the Bruins to pick up such a strong defender because that's where they were really lacking. They were just relying too much on Charlie McAvoy and Brandon Carlo and Matt Grzelcyk, just those guys. Now you have flexibility and depth. It was huge for Boston. That's exactly what they needed. They needed to get stronger and tougher at the blue line, and that's what they did, picking up Lindholm. Now, Vakanainen has played great. He's played good for the Bruins this year so far. But, for a guy that young, you still got Lindholm. He's still, late 20s, early 30s. There's still plenty of time for him. And you also, maybe get a nice transition, if Patrice Bergeron decides to walk away or if he decides to retire or all your veteran players decide or not decide, but you decide that, it's time to move on and get a new one. Lindholm is a good glue guy to have around for a really long time. So just watch what Lindholm does on the ice in the first game tonight, actually going to take on Tampa. So this will be huge to see how the new players are able to incorporate themselves. But as I said, they also made headlines with the non-moves. Jake DeBrusk does not get dealt. He even signs an extension with the Bruins, a 2-year, $8 million extension. Now, I did say for the Bruins to have success, Jake DeBrusk would have to stay with Boston. And, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know if there's been talk, if Jake DeBrusk has changed his mind publicly. He has not revoked his trade request. But I think now that he's on the first line and he's got this clarity, as he said, not knowing, is he going to be traded? Is he not going to be traded? He's just been professional throughout this whole thing. He's going to be a huge factor now into the postseason. Now that we know that DeBrusk is going to continue to have his role, he's still going to be on that first line, still get the ice time. I think it's going to be huge for a postseason run for this Bruins team. Now, this doesn't mean that when you get to the offseason that he's not going to be dealt. It just means there's going to be a bigger price to pay for anyone who wants to trade for him. It's hard to say, if DeBrusk would have an opportunity, if he would say, I am going to revoke. I actually do like it here. It's hard to say if he still thinks that way. We have no idea about that. But I think from a Bruins management and a fan's perspective, how important this guy is to your success. And just looking at the standings really quick, you're only 1 point behind Tampa Bay. If you are able to win this game against Tampa tonight, you get into the top 3 in the Atlantic Division. You're out of the wild card picture. And that would be huge for this Bruins team. So I think the moves that they made and the non-moves, as I mentioned with DeBrusk, I think it's huge. You give in the goaltending spot, Ullmark and Swayman, you get a good team in front of them. You beef up on defense and you continue to have your strong offensive players really for a good 2 to 3 lines. So I like what the Bruins did. They didn't make the big splash, but they made a good move. I like what they did, and we'll just see if that translates to success within the last couple of weeks of the regular season. But speaking of the last weeks of the regular season, The Celtics continue to climb up the standings. Another strong week of performances. They are now 27-9 in the year 2022 since the calendar year. I mean, wow. Absolutely wow to see this team turn around. They've won 9 of their last 10. They're 22-4 in their last 26 games. And just looking at the standings real quick, they're only a game and a half behind the Miami Heat. And of course, the headline for the Heat was the little riff that they had in the bench from the loss to the Warriors. But the first seed is still up for grabs. I think when you look at where the seeding is right now, you want to be anywhere but number 2. I think you want to be anywhere but number 2 because, just looking at it real quick, everyone's expecting, Brooklyn is going to win against Toronto. We don't know that for sure. But if you have to play Brooklyn in the first round, that is not, it's not a good sign. I mean, there's still, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks left. I'd say 3 weeks left of the regular season, and Brooklyn, just looking real quick, is 2.5 back of Toronto right now for that 7th spot. So if they win right now, they'd play Philly in that second round. But I think this is a team that should gun for that number 1 spot, and I think they've been playing great. They're playing championship level basketball. I don't think they're a championship level team, at least not yet, because they still got a stretch of games where I really am curious to see how they play. And I'm talking like these teams in the East. They've still got a game against Milwaukee. They've got a game against Miami. I want to see what they do against those teams. I mean, the performance that they had last night against Utah, where they basically were shooting the lights out in the first half and had a 30-point lead on them at one point. I mean, come on. They've won 5 straight, and the margin of victory has been about, I want to say, maybe 20 points or so. You've beaten the Warriors, the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Jazz, and the Kings in convincing fashion, I would add. Convincing fashion. So I think this is a team, I just want to see what they do in the last stretch of games. And heading into the postseason is where I want to see, how well they do. Because now they get a little bit of rest, and then they're going to play against Minnesota at the Garden on Sunday. Then they travel to Toronto. They host Miami. But again, you wrap up the season, next Wednesday, April 6th. Chicago, Milwaukee, Memphis is your final 3 games. I want to see what they do against those top East teams. I want to see how they play against Milwaukee. I want to see how well they play against Miami. Are they going to be dominant wins? Or are they going to be, grinded out games? I just want to see how they do. 6 of their final 8 games are against teams that are over 500 right now. So I want to see how they do against, playoff caliber teams, because we're seeing it in the West. They're not going to be playing anyone in the West, unless they get to the NBA Finals. I want to see how they do against teams in the East. We've seen they can beat Philly. We've seen they can beat Brooklyn. We've seen they can beat Cleveland. They've beaten Charlotte. They've beaten Atlanta. How do they stack up against the rest of the East? But I think on the court, everyone in the rotation knows their role to perfection. You've got Derek White, who's basically the leader of that bench unit. You've got Grant Williams, who's coming along as a strong 2-way player, which, by the way, the Batman, I don't think it's a really good nickname for him. But I want to talk about Peyton Pritchard. Pritchard is coming along as a reliable source of offense off the bench. Not only is he shooting, but his ability to drive to the basket and find the open guy. I think, that's why the Celtics drafted him a couple of years ago, was because of his shooting and just his offense. And I think he's just getting more and more confident the more minutes he gets from Coach Udoka. And not only that, but he's just stepping up defensively. This whole team is stepping up defensively. I mean, if they've been able to slow down Nikola Jokic, they can stifle anyone. So I'll make a full assumption on their title hopes, at the end of the regular season. I just want to see, they've still got some big games to end the regular season. I want to see how they perform in that, if they maybe maxed out or if teams have kind of figured it out. So we'll see what the Celtics can do. But for now, let's just enjoy the success that they've had recently. But something to not really enjoy right now has been the Patriots, their ability I shouldn't say ability, their willingness to go out and spend in free agency. They're, at least in my eyes, they're confusing me with some of the moves they're making. I mean, Jawan Bentley, Trent Brown's re-signed for 2 years each. I think that's fine. But the big move is Malcolm Butler. I'm not sure about this move here. Why are you bringing back a guy who basically hasn't played competitive football in over a year, at one point was retired, and you're giving $9 million over 2 years to someone where there might be some friction between head coach and player? Because if you remember, the last image we have of Malcolm Butler in a Patriots uniform is him on the sidelines during Super Bowl 52, where everyone is saying if he had played in the game, you would have beaten the Eagles. You would have been able to shut down Philly and not let them score 41 points. Okay? I just don't get it. Like, that's your replacement to JC Jackson, is just a familiar face in Malcolm Butler. So you're telling me your top two cornerbacks are Malcolm Butler. You're putting Malcolm Butler on, just thinking of the receivers, you're putting Malcolm Butler on Stephon Diggs. You're putting him on Tyreek Hill, on Jalen Waddle. You're putting him on all these guys. Listen, he was never any better when he left New England to start with. So that was probably in Butler's eyes thinking, my success came with New England. Let me go back there and hope I can go back to success. I just don't see it. I don't understand what Belichick is doing. And maybe we'll get, a better explanation as to why Malcolm Butler was benched in the Super Bowl and why he didn't play in that game. Maybe, he'll clear that up when we get started with training camp. But I don't know what Belichick is doing. I still don't know what he's doing, bringing in, old, slow guys, familiar faces. It's what he's done. But now when you don't have, a guy like Tom Brady to bail you out, you actually get to look at this stuff and think, how is this team getting any better? How is this team getting any better? Because they've gotten no wide receivers, even though that is maybe a number one, number two need for this Patriots team. Maybe they're holding out for the draft, for an absolutely stacked class. And you're not really getting any better defensively. You haven't signed anybody. And we're hearing reports that they just don't want to spend the money. They're competitive, but they don't want to spend the money. Or I think it's they won't spend the money. They spent it all last year on a bunch of guys. I don't know what Belichick and this organization is doing to try and make this team better. Because look around the AFC. Look around. The team in your own division, Miami, just got probably 5 times better. Cleveland, who missed the playoffs, got better. Denver got better, and they missed. Indy, Vegas, Chargers. You have probably a dozen teams right now in the NFL who, in the AFC, who all think they are A, playoff teams, and B, Super Bowl contenders. I mean, and what are you doing? Just sitting on the sidelines, eating chips or something, watching all the moves get made? What is Belichick doing? I really just want a clear-cut answer onto what his strategy is. What is his mindset? I mean, maybe we'll just get some answers once training camp starts and we hit the draft. But again, Boston looks for success. And so far, we've seen a lot of success from our teams. We'll see if that carries over as we head into spring. Finally, to end our show, as we always do, we get our LOL moment of the week. And before we get into this week's moment, I encourage everyone, check out our Instagram page at @LetMeSpeak_official. Go vote on the ultimate LOL moment bracketology. Okay, we're about to lock up everyone in the Sweet 16. We just released our Region 4 matchups from the round of 32. So the next couple of days will be Sweet 16 matchups. Keep an eye out for that. But let's talk about this week's moment. Not only was there March Madness on the court with all these athletes and coaches, but it was even some people off the court who got a little bit into the March Madness. So this week's LOL moment of the week goes to Cassidy Cerny and Nathan Paris. These are two Indiana cheerleaders. So if you haven't seen the video, it was a disastrous situation during Indiana and St. Mary's during the round of 64. The ball was stuck. The basketball was stuck in that little frame where the shot clock meets the backboard. So it was stuck and no one could get it. You know, they tried everything. They tried standing on a chair and getting a broom to dislodge it. But then here comes Cassidy Cerny, Nathan Paris. They come to the rescue. Nathan puts Cassidy on his shoulder. She goes up, grabs the ball, and is able to let game resume. So it was a disastrous situation, but these two cheerleaders were able to save it. And for those that didn't see it, not only is the moment great, but the announcer call from announcer Andrew Castellanos is pretty incredible. Take a look at this.
Major issues here in Portland.
Why don't we get a new ball?
Yeah, why don't the cheerleaders, they're used to going up high. Let's get yes, get the cheerleader up. Get her up there. This is how you do it. Give her the mob. No, she's got it. Oh, what a play. The cheerleader saves the day. And that's her one shining moment.
I mean, he goes all out. This was literally like, it was like there was a buzzer beater, like when Villanova had that buzzer beater for the national championship and Jim Nantz went absolutely crazy. He went absolutely nuts for those cheerleaders, Cassidy Cerny and Nathan Paris. But what was funny enough after the moment, you know, when you hear about when they did interviews, not only for like TMZ and Good Morning America, they said they were prepared for that moment. You listen to them. They said, you know, it would be funny enough if a situation like that happened. And sure enough, you saw all the players and the referee even looked at them saying like, hey, let's try it out. Let's try it out. And sure enough, here they come. They were like, I guess it's our moment. And as Andrew Castellanos said, it was their one shining moment. And it's been the ultimate LOL for this whole March Madness. Everything crazy has happened. That might have been the craziest moment. But what's great about this moment is that everyone has been through this situation. I know I've been through it multiple times growing up where a ball gets stuck. Now, if you have like a backboard, if you have a hoop like in your driveway or something, it hasn't, you know, maybe gotten stuck at the top, but it's been wedged in between the rim and the backboard. And you've had this problem so many times where you try to get a broom or you get another ball to try and dislodge it, you know, where you throw it up and try to knock it loose. Everyone's been in this situation. And I think that's what makes this moment great is it's so relatable. It is relatable to see this kind of moment happen because everyone has been through this situation at least once where you have a ball stuck and you have no way of getting it. And so you go to the most unique situations. In this case, it's two cheerleaders stack them up on each other and retrieve the ball. So who would have known if that wasn't been able to happen? We could have been talking about, you know, Indiana and St. Mary's possibly doing an overtime later on in that game. But Cassidy Cerny, Nathan Paris for saving the day, saving the game between Indiana and St. Mary's, and maybe the most unique way of getting a ball that was stuck on the top of the backboard has landed both of you into this week's LOL Moment of the Week. So that wraps it up for this edition of Let Me Speak. Thank you everyone for tuning in wherever you are getting this podcast. Make sure, as always, you are following our social media pages on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All you got to do is search Let Me Speak Podcast. And remember, as always, if you got a point you got to get across, just let the whole world know. Shut up and let me speak.